Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Orphan Black Season 4, Episode 6, The Scandal of Altruism. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Orphan Black, so I'll have to give a spoiler warning for Orphan Black up to Season 4, Episode 6. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So I'm just going to come right out and say it. I absolutely love this episode. This, I would say, is the best episode of Orphan Black that I've seen in a long time, possibly since Season 1. And it got me looking at the entire show with a whole new perspective, as I think that in retrospect this makes me appreciate Season 4 overall much more. So we start the episode with a Beth flashback, and right there they had me, as I was really hoping that we'd get more of Beth's story, as I didn't feel quite completed yet for me. But we begin a scene with her sneaking into some party with Evie and Susan Duncan, where she tries to kill Susan, but it cuts away, and we'll come back to that later on. But I thought this was a great way to begin the episode, as it had me super invested to find out what would happen next. So then we go to Susan talking with Ira and preparing to do an exchange with Sarah to gain access to the original, and they all seem really hopeful. And then, much as I suspected, Cosima goes to Sarah and suggests that they do the exchange because, after all, Cosima's life hangs in the balance. However, she suggests that they do it in a way that Susan would only have access to the genes of the original that have to do with the Lita cells, so that she wouldn't be able to use it to save the casters. This, of course, is not ideal for Ira, as he's dying as well, but Susan decides to go along with this and do the exchange. So this was a pretty intense, and it makes sense to me that Sarah would go along with this deal, as desperate as she is to get the slug out of her cheek, as well as finding a cure for Cosima. But Siobhan isn't completely on board with this plan, as it puts her mother at risk, and she's definitely not okay with the fact that Sarah went behind her back to make this deal, which also makes sense. It's also quite foreboding. It's quite telling the way Siobhan says, "I think this is a bad play," which she turns out to be right, but more on that later on. So then we follow up more on Beth, as we see she threatened to kill Susan, but Susan pleaded with her, saying that she cares about her and her sisters, and she's the only one looking out for them. And so Beth just leaves. Then we cut to the present, where Sarah is looking at the tape of Beth, all the pieces are starting to fall into place. However, they still don't understand why Beth returned with blood on her hands if she didn't kill anyone. Meanwhile, Ira is understandably upset and feels like he's being sacrificed for the greater good, which he's not completely okay with, but Susan assures him that she'll do everything she can to find a way to save him as well. So, in addition, we get a side plot about Krystal going to the police and Art finding her and putting her aside, and they call in Felix to placate her, which they do by playing into her conspiracy theories involving cosmetic companies, which I thought these scenes were okay. They didn't bother me, but I'm just reminded about how they use Krystal for comic relief when her backstory is actually a bit more tragic, but whatever. I think she needs to know about the clones and everything. And I much prefer that they just tell her already and get her involved, as she's obviously really curious about what's going on. However, the way they leave it, she thinks that Felix and Art are on her side, and that she'll give them a call if she gets suspicious again. However, maybe they will involve her in the future. I don't know. It's hard to say, because she did reveal that Delphine was shot. So then we go to make the exchange, where Cosima and Sarah go to Brightburn, where they successfully remove the slug from Sarah's cheek, while Susan goes to the comic shop, where Scott takes the sample from Kindle that Susan will need. So everything seems to be going as planned, and as they plan to move Kindle out and take her someplace safe, Things go south when she's abducted, and Sarah returns to discover that she has been abducted, and they assume that they've been betrayed, so she destroys all the samples, which apparently in retrospect was a bad idea. And then she takes Susan hostage. However, Cosima is still at Brightburn, so she's taken hostage by them when Susan doesn't reply. So at first they all assume it was Ira's doing, as he was upset that they weren't getting a cure for the casters, and I gotta be honest, I totally bought this as well. However, when Susan goes looking for Ira, she finds him slumped in a tub, ODing on pills, so basically trying to kill himself, so he definitely wasn't the one who did it. Then Scott calls to tell them that all of their data is being wiped by a Trojan virus, and they're losing all of the research that they gained from studying Kindle. And so that's when Susan and Sarah realize that this is a coup, and even Evie is behind everything, including trying to get Beth to kill her, and that we saw in the flashbacks. And then we see it's the police union rep guy, Detective Dooku, that has her, as he's apparently been an agent for Evie all along. They take Cosima to where they have Kindle, and then they kill Kindle and burn her body so that nobody could use her genetic material to save the clones. And then Evie explains it's because she feels that clones are obsolete, and Susan shouldn't waste her time focusing on them, and they should instead focus on the little slug bot thingies. And also it's an attempt for Evie to seize control of Neolution. So they leave Cosima alive to deliver the message to Susan and Sarah, but before leaving, she finally reveals to Cosima that Delphine was killed. This was such a powerful and amazing scene. I was completely blown away by it. These were all shocking turns that I was not expecting. I mean, I wasn't all that impressed with the fact that they revealed Evie to be the one behind everything, but it didn't bother me either. But the whole way that they pulled it off and connected everything so perfectly, I loved it. So, more than that, they finally tie up Beth's story as we get a few more flashbacks of Beth realizing that Evie was trying to use her to kill Susan, and she confronts her and beats the shit out of her, which is why she had blood on her hands in the video. But Evie tells her that Beth knows too much, and that everyone she knows and cares about will be killed to cover up what she knows, and basically that the only way to stop that and protect them is to kill herself. And this makes total sense. I said in my review of the first episode of the season that I loved it because the fact that Beth would kill herself always seemed like a plot hole to me, so I like that they're trying to explain this. However, this episode goes a lot further and ties it all to the current plot, and it makes total sense why someone with her fragile mindset that they established in the first episode, who's more concerned with protecting the one she loves, would kill herself. And you gotta also have to remember, at this stage with Beth, she was pretty much alone in the fight. She didn't have a whole support system the way that Sarah does. And so it makes sense to me, and I just absolutely loved how they played this out in this episode. It was a brilliant storytelling, which frankly I thought was beyond this show. So part of the reason why I think I love this episode so much is because we didn't get any Donnie or Allison in this episode. While it's not to say that I don't like those characters, is I do find their comic relief effective with them from time to time. Particularly Allison I quite like. But I just think that they've been overdoing it too much recently, so it was great to have a break from them finally. And so this episode ends almost like a season finale where everything looks really dark and things are pretty much as bad as they could possibly be. Kindle is killed, all the research that could save Cosima's life is destroyed, and on top of that she finally learns that her lover was killed, and that big reveal of why Beth killed herself made this a really effective ending. So one might ask where things could possibly go from here, as everything looks to be lost. But there are several factors out there still in play, one being that Sarah and Siobhan still have Susan, who will probably be completely on their side at this stage. It does seem that Evie has taken control of the illusion, but surely Susan still has some resources at her disposal, including Rachel. And there are several other variables out there, like MK, whom Sarah probably understands better now that she knows what happened to Beth. And Helena is still out there somewhere as well. Something tells me that she hasn't disappeared from the show entirely. And something else I'm sure will come into play is Detective Dooku seemed actually remorseful in that he didn't want to do what he was doing but was being coerced by Evie somehow, so we might learn more about that later. And apparently Evie is the one who is the true villain of the show. Also, Evie's last words to Cosima about Sarah leaving it alone or Beth died for nothing was obviously a threat that she would kill all of the Lita clones because, if they don't let it go, because that's why Beth sacrificed herself, so that Evie wouldn't resort to that, so she's threatening to resorting to that again. However, as I said, Sarah has a support system that Beth didn't have, and plus she's not in such a fragile mind state as Beth was, so I don't think Sarah would give in as easily. So I am genuinely excited to see the rest of the season, and while that I hadn't been before, and I do believe it's looking very likely that season 4 will be the best season of Orphan Black since season 1, so I can't wait. So my rating for the Scandal of Altruism out of 10 is a 10, the best. The best episode I can remember seeing since season 1 is not only has me fixated to see what they'll do next, but is also retroactively makes all season 4 fit together perfectly, and also fixed a plot hole that has existed since season 1 with Beth's suicide, and they did it in such an intense and emotionally powerful way. I was just completely blown away by it. So that's my review for the Scandal of Altruism. Be sure to check back here every week as I continue to review episodes of Orphan Black, and be sure to check out my channel for many other videos on shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, Fear the Walking Dead, and more, and be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.